Good afternoon. My name is Adam Williams, and you are listening to another episode of Retail Redeveloped. I'm very excited right now because we're about to talk about digital transformation. And if anybody listens to this podcast on a regular basis, you know that digital transformation is something that I think about all the time. It's something that I encounter every single day. So we're talking today with an expert. His name is Howard Tiersky. He is the author of a new book called Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance. Now, he is a founder, CEO. He has his digital transformation agency. He works with massive Fortune 100 names that everybody is familiar with, everybody from Verizon, NBC, Universal Studios, JP Morgan. You name it. It's a murderer's row of clients. But before we get into digital transformation, Howard, do me a favor. Tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do, a little bit of your background, and explain to people why the hell we should listen to what you have to say.
Oh boy. Well, so
No pressure.
Adam, thanks. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here. Why should you listen to what I have to say? Well, there's a lot of things I don't know much about. I'll be the first one to admit that. But I have spent the last roughly 25 years of my life doing mainly one thing, well, two things: raising a family. I've got 5 kids, and working with large enterprises on digital transformation. And so just by sheer putting the hours in, for no other reason, having worked with dozens and dozens and dozens of large companies, and been privileged to have been a part of many great successes, but I'll tell you, I've been involved in just as many failed efforts to transform companies. And because this stuff's really tough, and through the combination of seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work, I've really been able to distill what are the best practices when approaching this type of enterprise transformation, which has become more important now than ever as the world continues to move more and more rapidly towards a customer lifestyle with digital at the center.
So talk me through what the digital transformation agency is. Why? Obviously, we're all in business to make money, and I'm sure that's one of your goals. But walk me through what brought you from, because you're an accountant consultant by trade. Is that correct? Old school.
Well, I have a sort of a funny career trajectory. I actually started in the theater.
Okay.
And also in graphic design. And I was doing that for Ernst & Young Consulting. And then as digital, first pre-internet forms of digital, like kiosks and CD-ROMs and things. And then certainly with the growth of the internet, I got kind of pulled into the consulting work. And so I was just happened to be in the right or wrong place at the wrong or right time, depending on how you view it. But in any case, I was just there at the early days of large brands wanting to figure out how and if this internet digital world applied to them, working with the company that they were turning to answer that question. And so that's kind of how I wound up doing what I do.
So walk me through, and we don't have enough time on this podcast for you to give me the full history, but walk me through kind of the birth of that kind of light bulb that went off for these companies, and how drastically that's changed to today. I can only assume that at the beginning it was more lip service, like, hey, we're hearing that we should start thinking about digital, to present day, where in the last, call it 36 months or so, it's become the number one thing on every large company's mind. Walk me through how it's been being a part of that from kind of the infancy to today.
Yeah. Well, it's been a gradual transition for many companies. When I started doing this work in the 90s, the question was, what's the internet and why would we want a website? Now, obviously, that's a long, long time ago. And so I don't know that there was any one light bulb moment. I think that companies, initially approached digital as it's just another communications mechanism. It wasn't a major game changer for their businesses. Back then, it was just another way to get their message out, another way to provide content and information to their customers, employees, shareholders, whoever it may be. And then we've just been on this accelerating journey of digital becoming more and more and more important. For many companies, it started to become not just a communications mechanism, but an alternative way of interacting with customers. Early e-commerce. Oh, and instead of buying it at the store, you could buy it on our website. Again, this is a lot. Instead of going to the branch, you could check or looking at your statement, you can check your bank account balance on the website. And then what's happened over the last few decades is that started out being a peripheral part of a business. It then became a differentiating part. I mean, as much as 10 plus years ago, we were hearing from customers that one of the key things that they use to determine which bank to bank with is how easy to use their website is. So obviously that's, they never were saying that about the statements. I never heard someone say, I picked my bank based on how easy the statements are to read, but they say that about the websites. And that was quite some time ago. But now we're yet in another stage. We're in a stage where many of the companies that are the most successful, they haven't just bolted good digital stuff onto their business. They have built a business around a digital economy. A company like Airbnb or Uber or Facebook or Google or Netflix could not have existed. The fundamental nature of their value proposition would have been impossible in a pre-digital world. And while that's not the only way to run a business today, if you just look at all the companies that have the greatest growth and valuation over the last 5-10 years, most of them are either companies that were built digital up, or they're companies like, for example, Walmart, who's gone through a massive digital transformation to be able to leverage digital to provide a better customer experience, to provide greater efficiencies, and therefore a better value proposition to the customer. This is the main path to success today.
Yeah, it's almost like, when oil was discovered, right? Like every major power all of a sudden was somehow in the oil business. It's striking how similar this is. So talk to me. This is a fascinating question that comes up on this podcast all the time. Talk to me about the companies that are truly digitally native. You mentioned Airbnb. You mentioned, Uber. We could think of dozens of others, versus, let's say that you had a client that did not start off digitally native, like a Nike, pick any kind of legacy brand that was around when people were still walking around with beepers and pagers. Walk me through how these companies are reacting, adapting, trying to survive, and what it's like for a company like that, a legacy company, versus one of these digitally native companies that doesn't know any better, right? To your point, they were impossible and now they're taking advantage.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we see a lot of different examples of companies who have taken different steps and been more or less ambitious in the digital realm. And we've seen a lot of different results. Frankly, we've seen a lot of companies go out of business because they failed to transform fast enough. And I'm sure we could list many companies that fall into that category. Within the companies that I've worked with, usually there's a diversity. Companies don't speak with one voice. Companies don't have opinions. Companies don't do anything. Only people do. And so when you start to work within an organization, what you usually find is there's some people who are enthusiastic about change and want to drive things forward. And there are other people who want to pull things backwards for a variety of different reasons. In my book, I go through 12 different reasons that people and organizations resist change. And so, that's the first thing that you see in almost any company, is that you see these forces pulling the company in different directions. One of my, career failures was I was brought in as a high-priced consultant to Blockbuster, not too far after they were sort of at their peak, when they were still really a powerhouse of home video entertainment, to help develop their digital vision. And this, of course, was, 15, 16, 17 years ago. And, we developed what I think would have been a very winning strategy if it had been executed. And I only say that because if I look at the companies that have been successful, like Netflix, what we were suggesting to Blockbuster way back then had a lot of parallels and similarities with what the successful companies in the streaming home entertainment space have done. But at Blockbuster, there were competing factions. There were people who were very committed to, and I know we have a retail store audience, committed to the idea of, we are a retail store company. Many of the people who were the top senior executives had come from other venerable retail chains, and they saw the power of location, a store in every town. And that was where they believed the DNA of the company was. And so if all of a sudden you offered them a vision of the company where, hey, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, maybe we don't even need retail stores anymore. We can go direct to the home. Well, that's like a knife in the back of those people, right, for whom it's only natural for them to think, what place do I have in a company like that? Why on earth would I support transforming this company that I am a key part of to a company that I might at least fear would have no place for me.
But that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, right? And that's maybe the most perfect example, right? Like the books have been written just about this Netflix and Blockbuster battle. And there's a great podcast called Business Wars that really dives into this battle. And it's great. The Netflix Blockbuster battle is really fun. Walk me through kind of some maybe larger steps that maybe you cover in the book about how companies can take these big risks and how companies that are established can see around corners, because big companies, they move like, oil tankers. They don't move like speedboats. So walk me through maybe another example or dig into that example a little bit more.
Sure. Well, that's often true that large companies do tend to move slowly. In the case of Blockbuster, I mean, if you want to know what they could have done, well, I mean, look at what Netflix did. I mean, Netflix, despite being a relatively new company compared to Blockbuster, when I was at Blockbuster, Netflix was primarily in the DVD by mail business.
Right.
Now, that was still a pretty digital business because you went on and you managed your queue on a website and all those types of things. But nevertheless, they were fundamentally about delivering a silver disc to your mailbox. That was what you were paying for. And they recognized that they needed to make a massive pivot and focus on streaming video to the home and also original content. And so Netflix transformed their business, even though it was already quite successful, into something that looks quite different today, and which of course is successful at a whole other level. Blockbuster, despite dabbling in some other areas and making some attempted investments, fundamentally at its heart was focused on dominating the physical retail store home video model. And let's be honest, is there anything that Blockbuster could have done if they were committed to, we're going to have physical stores and you're going to come into our store and that's how you're going to get your movie, right? If you just allow, anything else could have been changed, right? Different pricing models, different, marketing schemes. Who knows? The videos could have been on USB drives, whatever else. But is there any way that could be successful today? I would argue, I can't think of how that could possibly have been successful. So by holding on to that, by and large, and when I say by and large, I only mean a lot of times companies, they kind of soothe themselves by saying, well, we have an R&D group. We're working on some stuff. We have some clever people. I mean, look at my project. They paid a whole bunch of money for us to come in. They had people on staff there. They had some executives that were leading this kind of visioning. So they were investing, but it was that kind of investing that ultimately becomes kind of innovation theater.
Right.
It's to make yourself
it gets watered down. Yeah. It makes us feel like we're doing the right thing. We're giving some lip service to the board.
But when push comes to shove,
right,
are you really ready to do what Apple did? To say, you know what, we're going to come out with the iPhone and it's going to totally cannibalize the iPod. It's probably going to put the iPod, our number one best-selling product, out of business, because this is the way the world is going. And it's not going to be a successful business strategy to try to hold back the tide of progress, but rather to ride that wave, ride that tide to the next crest. So I think there's many examples of that. And what I find particularly inspiring today is that there's a lot of examples of legacy companies who have done that. It's not only the pure digital companies that have done that.
Well, you mentioned Walmart. I mean, the change in Walmart's digital experience 6 months or a year ago and today, it's a completely different experience. People make fun of me about how much I like Walmart and how much I use their app. It's just as good as, I say just as good. It's pretty close to Amazon's experience. It's pretty incredible. And they've done it like that.
Walmart is the number 2 online retailer in the United States.
And I guess Target's probably in there somewhere, but they're probably not close. Although Target has also done a great job.
And look at Starbucks. Starbucks has really transformed the experience, not the coffee, not the decor. Although sitting in a Starbucks on your laptop with great Wi-Fi is also an important part of the Starbucks experience. But the whole combination of the ability to order in advance and the currency, the payment, just making the whole ordering and pickup experience so much more seamless. This has been, a major transformation. And we're seeing this with other quick service restaurants.
Chipotle, same thing, completely different experience from pre-COVID to today. It's unbelievable how much better it's gotten. Yeah, I would say that the Chipotle experience has been wildly different. And again, I have one near my house. I love that kind of food. So I eat it at least once a week. And the experience is totally different. Walmart's totally different. And then you have, we could probably go down a list that's as long as my arm with these people that have either done a good job of it or are currently trying to kind of change their experience and adapt to the times. But I would love to focus a little bit more on your methodology, because I mean, customer experience in my world is everything. And at some point in the podcast, I want to argue with you about um, brick and mortar and its relevance going forward, because I'd love to hear what you have to say. But walk me through. I mean, you had to have a burning desire inside you to get something off your chest if you're going to take time out of your busy schedule to write a book. So walk me through your methodology. Walk me through why customer experience is everything in your mind.
Sure. Well, customer experience isn't everything, but it is the key determinant as to whether you're going to have a successful business or not. And it's for a very simple reason. What defines a successful business? There's many things that can contribute to a successful business, but at the top of the pack can be only one thing. Companies that are successful are effective at driving desired customer behavior. If you can get your customers to do what you want them to do, to buy more often, not to tie up your call center with endless calls, not to return the product, tell your friends, tell their friends about your store, your restaurant, or whatever it is. If you can get your customers to behave, you're going to have a great business. And that will cover a magnitude of sins if you're not doing everything else perfectly.
Yeah, sales cures everything.
Yeah. And if you cannot get your customers to do what you need them to do, then it kind of doesn't matter all the other stuff that you might do. So if you buy that premise that driving the behavior of your customer is by far the most important thing you can do in a business, then begs the question, well, what is it that drives customer behavior? And I go into this in more detail in my book, but if I were to do the very short version, I would say psychology tells us that people's behaviors are influenced mainly by two things: their thoughts and their feelings. That's what creates your behaviors. And what is it that creates thoughts and feelings? It's experiences. All these thoughts and feelings that you had today, you didn't have them as a baby. If you grew up from a babyhood in a empty, sterile room with no stimulation, you wouldn't be having all these thoughts. All of these thoughts that you have had in your life are germinated by some kind of experience, and all the feelings that you've had are germinated by that. And even if you don't believe me that it's true of all, it's certainly true of most. And so that's
nature nurture. I got you.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, if you want to have a successful business, you have to figure something out. And what's that? It's what are the experiences that will create the thoughts and feelings that will drive the behaviors that align with the success of my business. It's like one of those little Newton ball things where you pull back the ball and it knocks the middle ball and it knocks the next ball and the other one goes flying. And so from a methodology perspective, that's why customer experience is so important. And that's why the first step of the 5-step digital transformation formula I talk about in my book is to understand your customer. Very often, companies have only a sort of a general understanding of their customer. And really understanding, where's your customer right now? What are their hopes and fears, their dreams? What are their points of pain? What's annoying them? What is their real experience when they interact with your brand? And not the one you think they're supposed to have. What really happens when they go up to your drive-through and they don't get the right order, or you're out of barbecue sauce, or you don't take the credit card that they wanted, or whatever else happens, right? Understanding what that experience is really like is key, because that experience that they're having every day, whether it's the sales and marketing experience or the sort of shopping and purchase experience, or the consumption experience or the service experience, most businesses have a kind of a 4 to 8 part customer journey with different steps along the way. And at each step, they have experiences, and those experiences are going to affect what happens in the future in terms of the behavior that they're going to engage in the future. That's going to be the life or death of your business. And so that's the beginning of the process anyway. Understand the customer so you can start to be an architect of experience that will drive business results.
So walk me through, and let's make it a little harder on you. Don't pick Amazon. Don't pick Walmart. Tell me somebody that is doing an incredible job understanding their customer, and then tell me somebody that is getting left behind. Obviously, they might already be out of business, so it might be a moot point. But walk me through and explain to people how, what's that yardstick? Like, who is impressing you right now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, let's think. I think, can I pick Netflix or is that also cheating?
I give you half credit, I guess. I'll give you half credit.
You want a more niche example, well, okay, I'll give you one. I wish I could remember when I was in the Village, Greenwich Village in New York City the other day, and it's not Smashburger, but another one of the chains like that serves kind of a higher end hamburgers. They had implemented a platform. I think it's called Lunchbox, if I remember correctly. And what that platform is it's a customer self-service platform for sit-down restaurants. And what it meant was that I could sit down and I could see use a QR code on the table. I could see the whole menu on my phone. I could drill in. I could see nutritional information. I could see pictures of every different dish, right, which you normally don't see in a menu. I could order and I could pay right there at my seat. So I'd give them my credit card. And so we ordered that way. Didn't have to wait for a server to come take our order and anything like that. We knew that as soon as we were ready, we could push done and that order was sent to the kitchen. And the server, 15 minutes later or so. In fact, he stopped by just to say that our order had been received, just to make sure we knew, like it wasn't just on the phone, a human knew. But then he brought our order out. We had a nice meal. And afterwards, we didn't have to do anything because we'd already paid. It was like Uber, just like when an Uber pulls up to your destination, you don't now have to pay. You just get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Well, it might seem like small changes, but if you think about the experience of sit down dining, the time you wait for your menu, and then the time you wait for the waiter to come take your order, and then afterwards, the time you wait for the check, and then you give them the credit card, and the time you wait for them to come, all of that is friction in the experience. If you could take that out, not only am I happier, but we're in a labor shortage right now. And so restaurants can't get enough employees. And so you take a typical server's interaction with a table. There's three key moments, right? There's taking the order, there's delivering the order, and there's dealing with the payment. You've just eliminated two of them. You've taken it down to only bringing the food. And by the way, if I decide I want another drink, I just put that in the app and the server comes and brings it. I don't have to wait for the server. I don't have to flag down the server and say, oh, hey, I want another beer. So this is a major streamlining, both from the customer and also from the restaurant in terms of the sit-down dining experience. Now, it does require transformation of how the restaurant works, and it requires some retraining of the diner of how they're supposed to interact with the restaurant. So it requires some change, but man, is that a better experience?
Yeah, I would say that you're hitting on, not being a restaurant guy, you're picking up on, or maybe you are a huge restaurant guy, but yeah, I deal with restaurants all day, every day, constantly. And you just hit on a massive conversation that's going on in every restaurant across the country. Because to your point, the labor shortage is massive. Getting humans that want to work right now is extremely challenging, and retaining them is extremely challenging. And if in the QSR world, fast casual world, I think that there's going to be no choice but to start implementing the changes that you're talking about. I'm very curious about how that's going to act once you start climbing that check average. Because that works really well in fast casual. It doesn't work well if I'm going to spend $100, $200. You want that service level, but on fast casual, I don't know how you don't start considering that as the only path forward.
Yeah. And I think it's a reasonable question. And depending on the nature of the dining experience, of course, in very high-end dining, there's an experience provided by the wait staff that is perhaps not reproducible in an app.
Not even high end. I would say like polished casual and above. Because I mean, if you're going to go, I want to know, what red wine that person would recommend. I don't know this one. What I mean? Like what?
Well, let me challenge your. We'll see how it plays out. But here's what I think. I think that at the very high end, I think there's a strong case to be made that human high touch experience from a really polished waiter or a sommelier. Okay, I'm with you, right? But when you have a 22-year-old kid coming to your table and you ask them which wine is good with the veal, do they really have any idea, right? Or are they just making stuff up and telling you whichever wine bottle is going to get them the biggest tip, versus that app being integrated with a third-party wine
like
expert
Vino
platform,
or something like that. Yeah.
Right? Exactly. I think that the opportunity to, it's kind of like saying, well, would you want to use Uber for a limo? I would say, sure.
Yeah.
but don't you want to interact? It's a high end. Don't you want to interact with the limo driver? I say, no, I only care about the limo, which is the equivalent of the food. I don't really care that much about the person. Their job is just to get me to the end. And unless that person is almost an entertainer, the interaction with that person is really adding to the quality of the interaction. They're just friction. And of course, apps have friction too, right? They don't read your mind. It has to have a user interface that's super intuitive and easy to use. Maybe a high-end restaurant should hand you an iPad so you have a nice large screen to use. And you have to make sure that you've done a beautiful job of creating that menu experience. Again, like I mentioned, the restaurant that I was at had pictures of each food item. It had nutritional information. You could filter if you had gluten-free, you could click one button and now the menu is only the gluten-free items. Try that with a waiter. Just be like, which items are gluten-free? They're gonna be like, and they're gonna kind of go through and say, let me think, this one, and who knows if they're even gonna tell you the right information. So I really think that even as you move up that scale, maybe until you get to the very top, I think a really well-crafted digital ordering and certainly payment experience is going to beat your typical wait staff in a restaurant.
I understand 100% where you're coming from. And I think that my argument would be nuanced kind of in the middle, right? Like I even agree that, if my server is some 21-year-old kid, like if I'm at the beach or if I'm at some resort town, give me a digital interface all day, right? Because that person is looking at the clock, trying to figure out when they're getting off so they can, go do whatever they want to do. But I tend to go to restaurants that have a culture to them that I think would be harder to translate, unlike a Chili's, unlike any kind of chain, right? Like that. Yeah. I think that those people aren't practicing a craft, right? They're just, probably just trying to get that job.
Well,
I agree with the premise of what you're saying.
Yeah. And I would toss out one last thought to you, which is that as automation of one sort or another, like we're talking about, removes tasks from people who work in any business, there's two ways to deal with the surplus that's created. One is to cut costs, or in the case of a labor shortage, just not have a crisis, right? Because fewer people can serve more tables in our example here. But there's also the opportunity to find higher value ways for those people to delight your customers. For example, one thing I hear that's a complaint from waitstaff these days all the time is selfies, or not selfies, I guess, but can you take a picture of us, right? You hear from waitstaff, I am trying to serve all these tables, and now I've got someone who thinks I'm a photographer and they want me to take a picture of them at their table. Well, I would turn that on its head and I would say, how great that that's an opportunity for your waitstaff to provide a better experience. Instead of seeing that as a distraction from their job, that is a more personal, higher value service than typing in their order into a POS system. Let's give them a beautiful digital experience and free your staff up, if you have enough staff, to cut the same ratio of staff to tables, to find, like you said, expand, give the person who's coming to the restaurant more of an experience of the culture, instead of just having them spending time typing stuff in and calculating a bill and bringing it over and running credit cards and doing all that kind of stuff.
And I would agree 100% with that part of your premise, and even add to it that if you make the servers more like food runners and you have less of them, it would probably free up your labor percentage to have another manager on duty, which could then really specialize in table touches. That person is definitely going to know what good Chianti is on the list. That person is definitely going to be able to point you in the right direction and really give you that personal touch. So maybe the melding of really high level staff with this digital interface is where that kind of middle ground could really take hold.
Love it.
All right, so let's get off of our McDonald's versus Chili's topic and go back into your backyard a little bit. Tell us a little bit about how you came to create your digital agency, what From is, and what led you to publish this book. What was it that was like, I figured something out, I got to let other people know. What was that moment?
All right, well, I'll take that last one. Full transparency, one of the reasons that I published the book was it can be difficult to differentiate yourself as a digital agency. There are a lot of digital agencies out there. We've got a ton of great clients: NBC, JP Morgan Chase, Airbus, Avis. So we're very fortunate. And yet, if we're talking to them and you ask them what's different about us, they would tell you a lot and they would say great things, I'm proud to say. But if you go to some other company where we're not doing business, we're just one of an endless stream of mid-sized digital agencies.
Right.
And so a few years back, we said, well, what can we do to really differentiate? And the insight that we had, and it's not our insight, it's kind of jumping on a stream of thinking, which is this idea of influencer marketing that says that in today's world, people are very cynical about brands and they're cynical about companies, but they believe in people. And so it can be a more powerful way of raising your profile as a business. If you have somebody, in this case, with this business, it's me, who is coming out, who's publishing, who's creating content, who's helping people through different types of media, either free or effectively free. I would argue that my book is basically free. I mean, the hardcover is like $24. You can use it to transform a multi-billion-dollar company. I mean, I would call that basically free. And but the point is, this is a way for us to, first of all, it's always gratifying to help companies that for one reason or another aren't going to hire us. Maybe they're in another part of the world. Maybe they're a small company that can't afford it, what have you. But also, I was on a call earlier today with one of the largest banks in the United States, and they read my book and they called us up and they said, the stuff you're talking about is exactly the stuff we're working on. We'd like to talk to you about working together. And so really, truth be told, it was that as much as anything, that desire to have a tool to market the business, than as much as any kind of sort of artistic impulse to make sure that my message was heard by the world. But of course, it's also gratifying to be able to share what I've learned in 25 years and know that a lot of people are reading it and using it.
What part of the book seems to be consistently jumping out at people? Obviously, you're using it as a sales tool, but there's a lot of content in there. What seems to really be kind of resonating with clients, potential clients, hopeful future clients? Like, what seems to be grabbing people?
A lot of people are interested in journey mapping, and about a fifth of the book is about journey mapping, and the 5 main sections of the book, and that's one of them. And a lot of people call me up and say, we've been trying to do journey mapping, we're struggling with it, or we realize
that. Tell people what journey mapping.
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks. So journey mapping is creating infographics that tell the story of, sometimes it's sort of a before and after story, right? First of all, what really happens today when different types of customers interface with your brand in your experience? Not the perfect theoretical experience, but what really happens? What are the challenges they face? What are they trying to accomplish? For example, how do they find you? Let's go back to the restaurant example. How do people wind up in your restaurant? And it's not one answer, right? But some of them use Google, and some of them ask a friend, and some of them drive by and see your sign, and some of them, who knows, maybe somebody even looked you up in the yellow pages. So, understanding that, how are people finding you? What kinds of experiences are they having as they make a reservation, as they wait, as they dine, when they leave, when they pay their bill? Understanding the actual experiences that people are having, and potentially with other competitors. And that's kind of what we call current state journey mapping. And that can be very enlightening, because very often when you do the research to really study that, you discover that you have an idealized idea in your head, and really understanding all the warts and challenges, and also the things that delight customers. Sometimes there are things that are delighting your customers about your business. And if you're an executive, or you're the head of marketing, or you're head of digital, you don't even realize what is so fantastic about the business either. But then once you've done that, usually you uncover a lot of friction and areas of opportunity for improvement. And that's really what it's all about. We're doing this not just to pat ourselves on the back, but to say, if we were to change, where would be the greatest areas of opportunity? And then the future state journey map is then a result of a creative process to say, all right, what should our North Star future be? What do we want that customer's experience to be? If their car breaks down by the side of the road and their current experience is that they wait on hold for 25 minutes trying to get a tow truck, what should the experience be? Maybe it should be they open an app on their phone and they push one button and they get a message that says, we're on our way, we'll be there in 5 minutes, instead of all the effort and reading a number off of a card and trying to describe to a tow truck where you are when you don't even know where it is, your car broke down, et cetera. Just as an example. And then, by the way, that's a project we've been working on for a AAA which is the transformation of the roadside service experience, which has been going very well.
OnStar's got that dialed. You just like hit the button and you're kind of done, right?
Indeed.
So who else in your mind really understands it? Like who and if they're one of your clients, perfect. If not, I want people to understand what companies they should look at as their North Star. Who is out there that is really trying to change the way we think. And I always fall back to the digitally native companies, right? Like Everlane and Allbirds and all these people that started in a laboratory, a data laboratory, Warby Parker, people like that, as opposed to all these other companies, the thousands and thousands of companies that are out there that should be reading your book right now, trying to figure out how the hell to stay relevant. So I'd love for you to just unpack a couple other either companies specifically that are impressing you right now, or just methodologies that the successful companies all kind of adhere to.
Sure. I mean, so many categories. Let's look at HBO, right? HBO is a classic legacy media company that they used to have a business that was focused on selling through MSOs, through cable companies. HBO is now and repackaging, second run movies, right? And now HBO is not only a leader in original content, but a direct to consumer play. They've completely transformed their business to one where they also still sell, of course, the old way, but they're moving to a model where they sell directly to you. HBO has made a transition from being an old school cable channel to being a direct competitor to Netflix. That's fantastic. And in a similar vein, in the same industry, look at what Disney's doing. Disney's done so many impressive things.
We're in the middle innings of this one. This one is fascinating.
Yeah, but look at Disney Plus.
That's what I was about to say. Did you see the data of how much they made on what's the new Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow?
No.
Oh my goodness. I need to pull this up while we're talking. The amount they made in the theater was not that much higher. Now, obviously, people's patterns haven't shifted back. I didn't go to the movie. I haven't been to the movie theater in a while. I love movie theaters, but Disney is an extremely pertinent example, and one that I think we're watching that transformation in front of our eyes. That's going to be a fun one.
And in the first 6 months of Disney's Disney Plus subscription platform, which was, I think, launched, in the third or fourth quarter of 2019, just before the pandemic. In the first 6 months, they had the same number of subscribers as Hulu that had been doing it for more than 10 years, and half as many subscribers as Netflix in 6 months. And this is a company that was founded in 1940 something, right?
Yeah. They got my credit card.
Right. So it just goes to show you, Walmart, Disney, it is not only the Amazons and Netflix who are able to be successful in the digital space. Although it is true that of the legacy companies, we have to cherry pick examples of ones that are killing it. It is true that the majority are still struggling to transform. But if you'd have looked at this 5 or 7 years ago, you might not have been able to find any examples. So the things are tilting to some degree in increasing favor of companies that have finally figured out how to leverage their scale and resources to win in a digital world.
All right. I'm going to shift gears on you again. So obviously I'm a brick and mortar guy. I love the actual experience of a storefront. Obviously Blockbuster is a great what not to do example of brick and mortar, but walk me through how you see the continued transformation of brick and mortar, its role in this new economy, this new digital paradigm. Like, walk me through from your perspective how physical retail is going to continue to evolve as we move forward.
Sure. Let me talk about two major trends. The first is the transformation of the brick and mortar store to a multi-purpose facility,
Agreed.
Which is both for as a showroom where you can buy a product that's there and bring it home, but also as a showroom for products which are not actually kept in inventory at the store, right? Endless aisle type experiences where you can order something, order in store, ship to home. And also as a distribution point for products that are kept in inventory that may be ordered at home and shipped to home, but from the store, so that you can, for example, compete with Amazon on same day delivery. As well as just a place to use as a fulfillment center, even if, as well as a place where to give you access to the full breadth of your inventory for e-commerce purposes, meaning, it may not even be close to you, but if the only place in your whole distributed 1,000 stores where you have a size XXL in turquoise of that particular sweater is in Nebraska, and someone in Miami wants it, why they'd want a turtleneck sweater in Miami, I don't know, but let's just say,
my mom does it. My mom wears turtleneck sweaters in July.
It's that hyper air conditioning, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Then you can find that one piece of inventory and get it to them. So this is one category, right? Which is that the retail store's purpose is now multi-purpose, which means that we need to think differently, both about the technology that we use for inventory and integration between the physical store and the digital experience. And by the way, it also means that we want to be empowering people in our stores with digital experiences, because they're going to be walking down the aisle of your store, holding their phone, holding their tablet. Do you want them to be on your app, or do you want them to be on Amazon, ordering stuff from Amazon as they see it in your store, in the practice that we call showrooming? So I think that's one category, which is just thinking differently about the role of the retail store and thinking in a more multi-use format for the retail store. So I'll pause there. I have a second completely different topic I want to mention in response to your question, but let me let you in case you want to follow up.
I don't want to throw you off, but the only thing that I would add to it, you said a showroom, but what I'm seeing is it's becoming more and more of an experience immersion tool, right? Like when you go into the Yeti flagship store in Austin, they ain't just trying to sell you a cooler, right? They're trying to get you into their ecosystem. And Restoration Hardware, the new RH Mansion stores, yeah, obviously they want you to buy a $15,000 couch, but when you walk in there, it's hard not to kind of aspire to the whole aesthetic and their whole ecosystem. So I would only add that extra kind of layer to what you said. Other than that, I agree very much with what you said. Now go ahead and hit me with phase two.
Well, phase two is very much what you just said, actually, which is
I was reading Cliff Notes.
That, but maybe a little bit more, which is creating a retail experience that's worth the drive.
Bingo.
Because any physical retail experience is competing with, I can just order from my computer at home. Why should I get in my car and drive, park, and go in? And why would I deal with all that? Now, there's a couple of reasons why. One reason why is because I need it like right now, this second. So, okay, 7-Eleven is still going to do okay. But let's face it, that's a relatively small percentage of purchases. Hardware stores, convenience stores, most people don't need a turtleneck right now versus Amazon next day delivery, except in unusual, it happens now and again, but it's not common enough to save retail, right?
Right.
But the other thing is creating an experience that's worth the trip. And so one version is single stores that have such a compelling sales experience or experience, depending, of course, what you're selling, like some of the stores you mentioned, that you're like, no, I want to go there. Even if I don't buy anything, it is in and of itself a form of entertainment. It is a place to go.
For my wife, that's Sephora. Like she can get it online, but she wants to go to Sephora. She freaking loves that place. Whatever they're doing.
And, if you look at something like Toys R Us, right? I remember being a little kid and seeing the ads for Toys R Us, and they made Toys R Us look like a kid's playground. There were giant cartoon animals roaming the halls there. It was a huge castle. There were bouncy trampolines everywhere. But, when you actually go to Toys R Us and maybe accepting the flagship store they were running in Times Square for a while, it was basically just a big empty warehouse with big steel shelves with boxes of toys. It wasn't like that at all. Toys R Us, except for the one Times Square store, was never worth the trip unless it was just to get the box that you needed. But they had the vision of it. It was just tough to make it a reality and maybe make it pay with retail margins. And that's one of the challenges of trying to create retail experiences that are so wonderful, which is sometimes that costs more money and you have to be able to justify it. But I think there's another way as well of getting to this worth the trip component. And that is the right shopping mall vision. And like we've worked, for example, with Mall of America, and they also have the new American Dream location in Secaucus, New Jersey, which is not far from me. And these are the malls that I think will do well in the future. Your local strip mall that's just a bunch of stores that sell stuff you could probably order off the internet easier, that don't provide a great experience, that's going to be a tough sell unless they become, like distribution hubs. But when you have a destination that has great dining and entertainment, and it's a beautiful facility and you can socialize there, and shopping is just one of the things. And then once you're there, of course, it's convenient to shop because you're already there. That is the other alternative. The store itself doesn't have to make it worth the trip. The larger facility, the larger mall makes it worth the trip. And then the store just happens to be there. So that's the other model that I think has the potential to be successful in the future.
Yeah, I obviously, I don't think every mall can turn into, I don't want to call it a theme park because I know it's more than that, but it's going to be hard to imagine all these existing malls taking that path. But I do think that taking a mall, now if you're in a B and C mall, you're probably screwed, right? Like if it was a mall that maybe shouldn't have been built in the first place, that's a tough one. But in these well-located malls, I'm very excited to see kind of what that 2.0 or 3.0 looks like, as they densify these malls, as they figure out now, a lot of people don't understand this, but on these large malls, there's such intricate parking language that all the anchors have. It's not just like, oh, they have this huge parking lot, let's put up a beautiful hotel and another beautiful restaurant and a beautiful multifamily site. It's unfortunately not that easy, but I do think that the rethinking of the American mall is going to be something that it's going to happen in our lifetimes, and it's going to be really, really interesting. And I can't wait to see the other Mall of America type test cases.
People like two things in the end. They like fun and they like convenience. So whatever you're doing to create a retail experience, you better ideally be both. But if you're not going to be convenient, you better be super fun.
Better be really fun.
And
better
know
be
that brick and mortar
castle.
has to fight. It's hard to win on convenience as brick and mortar. It's not impossible. Like again, 7-Eleven, but it's hard to win on convenience if people don't need it right now, because ordering from home from your iPad is so darn convenient.
Yeah, it's super convenient. Howard, do me a favor real quick. You've already been really gracious with your time, but tell people how they can connect with you, how they can hear more about what you're doing, how they can tell people where they can get the book and the title again. Just tell people how they can interact with you.
Of course, happy to. If you're interested in learning more about my book, there is a website for the book. It's winningdigitalcustomers.com. And you can also find the book, of course, on Amazon and most places that sell books, both for the ebook and the hardcover book. If you want to connect with me, I would encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me there by searching for my name, Howard Tiersky. And I do live casts twice a week and publish a lot of content as well, articles and such on LinkedIn. And you can also find my podcast wherever podcasts are sold, called Winning Digital Customers. And if you're interested in my agency, that's called From, and the URL is from.digital.
All right, I'm going to hit you with one or two quick knee-jerk questions before I let you go.
Okay, the lightning round.
Yeah, lightning round. A lot of people on this podcast talk about the acceleration of COVID and how it's taken certain trends and just press fast forward. In your world, has that been accurate? And I'd love to hear an example of if so, I'd love to hear an example.
Sure, of course it's accurate. Well, what we've seen, I mean, just look at work from home. Many companies were dabbling with that. A small number of companies were seriously, moving towards allowing more employees more workplace flexibility. And now all of a sudden, everyone was forced, or a large percentage of businesses were forced to have most of their employees work from home, discovered that it worked well. And so while there are exceptions, Morgan Stanley and others are saying, no, we want everyone back in the office. But many companies are saying we're never going back to the way things were before. And we see that, in many types of consumer behaviors. I mean, in my own household, for example, I'd never used Instacart before COVID. People told me about it. I don't know, just never got around to it. And now we use Instacart all the time, almost every day, ordering from Instacart. And I don't see that stopping just because COVID's over. So, COVID forced people to try to do many things digitally that they previously simply weren't in the habit of doing digitally. And many of the things that they did digitally, they've now discovered they like it and they want to keep it. There are exceptions. I don't think my kids want to do Zoom school anymore. They want to be back in school. So not everything was a positive trial experience, but many things were, and people will be retaining those behaviors going forward. And I think that's going to change so many different businesses, because that's what's caused the acceleration. Instead of giving people, it's sort of like, instead of letting people gently get used to the pool, like the way my wife gets into the swimming pool, the toe and then the foot and then the, little bit at a time, we pushed everyone in the pool, but now they're used to it. So now they're not going to go back. They're just going to stay in the pool. At least that's true, I think, for a lot of behaviors.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. What do your clients look at the halo effect? In my world, the halo effect, again, I'll go back to Warby Parker. They were selling a shitload of glasses online, but they're seeing that when they put, based on their data, when they put an actual brick and mortar store in, the zip codes around it are buying, exponentially more of their widgets. Do you guys talk about that in your world? If so, I'd love to hear an example.
Yeah, well, that's right. Because, I listed earlier that we need to think about the retail store as in terms of a multi-use, right? And you just reminded me that there's one use that I didn't mention, which is simply marketing. Simply marketing. Simply by having a Vitamin Shop store on Route 17, if I drive by it every day, if I never go into it, of course, I see that logo every time I drive by. And then when I'm at home thinking I need some more vitamin C, where should I order it from? Just, the potential is just like any kind, it's essentially kind of advertising. And then, of course, you may go into it, right? You may be in the area and drop in and maybe not buy anything, but get a sense of what the store offers and be introduced to some products. Or you may buy something there once and maybe speak to someone. Vitamin Shop has fantastic, knowledgeable sales staff, and they may tell me, oh, try this supplement. And so I buy it there once. And now every month I need to order more of it, but I don't need to drive back to the store. All I got to do is go online 3 days before my bottle's empty and just order another bottle. That's easier for me. So there's no question that in many categories of retail, having a physical presence for sure has a digital halo effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I agree completely. Last question. Something that I'm hearing come up quite a bit right now in my world is metrics, right? The old metrics of, sales per square foot and things like that they're not as applicable. Still very applicable. Still applicable in restaurants in particular, but it doesn't capture everything, right? Because let's say, for example, like this shirt is by a company called Howard Brothers, which is this awesome Austin company. And I went into their store last time I was in Austin, and it was just cool. Their surfboards just got this cool vibe to it. And I actually really like the clothes. I never once purchased anything in that store. And now on the other side of the country, I'm literally head to toe in Howler Brothers and have ordered half a dozen different things from their website. So the metrics have changed. What are you seeing as metrics to live and die by in your world now? I'd love to just understand how you're educating your clients.
Sure. Well, first of all, in an omni-channel world, the retail store is as much, in the old world, you went into the store, and if you liked the product, you had to buy it there. And if you didn't buy it and later decided you wanted it, you had to go back to the store and buy it. That's how it worked. In an omni-channel world, the store and the website both act as commerce channels and also marketing channels. Just like you can see something on the website, you can Google for something. I mean, I did this. I bought a chair from, what's it called? Something David, a very high-end furniture store. It's the chair that's actually sitting behind me. I forget the name of it, but
it's lovely.
Thank you. Well, we saw it on TV on, what's that show? The Good Wife. So we see the chair, and my wife's like, you need that chair for your office. And I'm like, well, this show is like 10 years old. How are we ever going to find that chair? So what does she do? And the chair is not just in one episode. It's in this one character's office, the whole show. She Googles chair from The Good Wife, David and Mitchell, I think it's called. Anyway,
okay.
Boom.
Good plug for David and Mitchell and The Good Wife. This is good.
Comes right up. That's where the chair is from. So we go to David and Mitchell, to this physical store, to check it out, to sit in it. Is it really comfortable and all that?
Like, how'd you hear about us?
Yeah. Well, no. We went in and they said, can we help you? Because I was even thinking like, will they still have it?
Right.
And I'm like, well, this is going to sound a little crazy, but we're looking for the chair from The Good Wife. She's like, oh, the chair from The Good Wife. It's all the way over there in the far back corner. Like, like 5 people a day walk in asking about the chair from The Good Wife. Apparently, like we were not the only ones that saw that chair and decided we were going to go to that physical store. So
now that is the extreme channel example right there. I haven't heard one like that.
But the point is that, and it happens the other way around as well, right? You can be in a store and see something and then later decide to order it online. And so, what you're really asking about is attribution. And attribution is the holy grail of marketing. If only, like the old cliche, half of your marketing spend is wasted, you just don't know which half. And while that, you'd like to think in a more digital world, that's not entirely true. Even with digital purchases, which you'd think would be more measurable, it's very difficult. I mean, there are people trying to use AI and trying to do attribution, but I think most people who are in the trenches know that it's very hard to know when someone buys, was it because of the last click? Was it because they Googled it and they clicked that ad? Maybe not, because maybe the reason they Googled it is they saw it in the store, or they saw a TV ad. It's very hard to know. So the first thing you need to know is to recognize the complexity, which I realize is not necessarily a reassuring answer, but to know that you can't only look at the sales of your website to judge the effectiveness of your website. You can't only look at the sales of your stores. It would be nice if you could, because it would be simple to measure, but it's just false. And then the question is, well, how do you develop an attribution model? And it's difficult, but you mentioned earlier the halo effect. One of the things that we see is if you look at stores that have retail locations, very often you see a lift in the e-commerce orders in that physical area within a certain perimeter, and you can see them fall off as you move farther from that retail location. So that gives you some mathematical tools to start to approximate and say, okay, well, in a state where we have absolutely no retail presence, we still get some orders. So maybe that's kind of a baseline. But now we see an elevation of orders in areas where we have stores. But it gets complicated, because why do you have stores in those areas? Well, maybe it's because the people that live in those areas are more apt to want the products that you sell. For example, it's a more affluent area and you sell a higher end product. So you would naturally be selling more products in that area, even if you didn't have a store, because the customers are more aligned. So, and you can do this all day, right? It gets very complicated and thorny. I don't have a magic wand to solve it. All it really means is we all need to be looking at a lot of metrics. And this is why we still need human beings, because computers can't figure this all out for us. Algorithms can't figure it all out. We need to look at all these numbers. We need to use our intuition and make the best business judgments that we can. But the omni-channel landscape is complex to measure.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to figure out what percentage is art and what percentage is science. Well, Howard, you've been so gracious with your time. Just having 5 kids alone makes you a busy man, much less having a digital agency to run. So I want to just take a second and acknowledge you, say thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your years of wisdom with the listeners and the watchers. And I really appreciate you coming on and explaining a little bit about this digital transformation that's so important in every retailer's life.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Adam.